Hello and welcome to another bite-sized video, and today I thought I'd take a quick look at sprite bullets and some of the ways that you can give your player extra control. So let's take a look at a quick video here where I've just basically said to spawn a bullet when the fire button is pressed, and as you can see, what happens is it spawns a load of bullets, which clearly is not what we want. So let's take a look at a simple way of solving that problem. What we want to do here is we're going to test for the fire button, but we're also going to test and set a flag when the fire button is released, so that the bullet will only be fired once until the player lets go of the button, which means that the player will have to tap the button in order to control the speed or the number of bullets. Okay, so what I'm doing here then is I'm testing for parent B here, and I'm also testing for the key press, and I'm putting an else in after the key press, so that if the key is pressed, let's just go through it compiled here. If the key is pressed, check for parent B. If the key is not pressed, then let parent B equal 0. And obviously the last thing that we want to add here is that when after the bullet is fired, we'll set parent B to be equal to 1. So what will happen there is if we let parent B equal 1 here, then the parent B won't be set to 0 again until the player lets go of the fire button. So therefore the player will have to tap the button rather than hold it down. So obviously in the initialize sprite code we also need to set parent B to 0, and I've done that there. And as you can see now, if I press and hold it, it will fire, and if I tap it like so, it will fire lots of bullets, but only when I tap the button quickly. So I can control the rate of fire. The player can control the rate of fire, and as always, more control for the player, more fun for the player. That's how it works. So that's basically that principle. But obviously if I'm now just holding the button down, it won't fire at all. So perhaps what we'd like to do here then is change this setting and set it up so that if the player holds down the button, it will auto fire, but perhaps not as quickly. So let's take a look at how we do that. So what we'll do here, rather than using just a simple binary 0 or 1, we'll make it more analog, and we will set parent B here to be 10, and it will now work like a counter. So we will now put in here, if parent B is 0, then fire. If not, subtract 1 to parent B. So basically if you hold down the fire button now, then parent B will count down from 10 down to 0, and then it will fire again. So let's take a look. Here I'm tapping the button, and here I'm holding it down. So as you can see there, here I'm tapping it, I can fire rapidly, and here if I hold it down, I'm firing at a rate of once every 10 cycles. So that gives the player now two choices about how they want to fire. And obviously, just to show you here, this parent B, you could set this to be a variable. If you picked up say a power up or something like that, it would allow faster. There you go, I'm holding down the fire button there. Okay, so that's great. That gives the player a certain amount of control, but obviously the next problem that we might want to think about is the number of bullets, because obviously we don't want to use up all our sprites on the screen and have it filled with bullets, because obviously other code then won't work. So let's take a look next at how we do that. Essentially what we want to do here is basically count the number of bullets that are on screen at any one time, so and limit that number. So the first thing that we'll do is, when we are spawning the bullets, we will add one, and we'll call it variable D here. You can use whichever variable you want. And in the game initialization code, you'll also need to put that D is 0. So that's the first thing. The next thing that we want to do is, if we look at our bullet code here, which is basically causing the bullet to fly across, when the bullet reaches the end of the screen, it's removed, and we want to subtract 1 to D. And finally what we'll do is we'll put a condition in here to check if D is above a certain number, and if it is, we won't allow the player to fire. So we'll put an if here. If 4 is greater than D, then you can fire, but if not, you can't. So as you can see here, then I'm allowed to fire a maximum of 4 bullets, and as soon as one of the bullets goes off the screen, then the count will be reduced and I'll be able to fire again. Now, I've combined this code with our first example where the player has to tap the button quickly in order to fire, and if they hold it down, nothing will happen. But it's perfectly possible to combine this with the second example where the player also has an auto fire option. So as you can see here, currently I've got let PM be 1 or let PM be 0 according to whether the fire button has been pressed. But if we make the changes that I showed earlier to allow a auto fire option by changing param B, then that will in fact give the player both choices and only fire 4 bullets. So if I set param B here to 10 as I did previously, and I'll also need to put in the additional else in param B so that we reduce param B down to 0 while the button is being pressed. So I'll put that in here, and what we'll then have is complete control from the programmer's end in terms of how many bullets and how fast the player wants to fire them, but at the same time the player has the option to fire quickly or to hold down the button, and of course you can use power-ups to control that. So as you can see here, 4 bullets being held down, or I can tap it rapidly, rapid fire, and I can get those 4 bullets going much more quickly. And again, as the coder, you've got complete control over that, but at the same time the player themselves also feels that they have the choice about exactly what strategy they want to use. And of course, as I said, you can add power-ups, you can make them fire more quickly, you can increase the number of bullets and everything else. Okay, so that's it for today, just a quick one, and perhaps I'll do more on this when I get a chance, but in the meantime, keep enjoying the Spectrum and happy coding. Bye bye.